how often do you really need to mow? You know, if you've got a property that's big, you've got pasture, you've got field, maybe just a big yard, you're mowing all the time. It feels like a real waste. You know, why are we mowing in the first place? You know, short answer is you gotta mow to keep down the weeds and the invasives. The grass will outcompete them. And it'll also keep down vermin. You know, mice and rats and stuff love to hide in tall grass and burrow around. Around your buildings, you got to keep it kind of short. That keeps them away. So that's my two main reasons for mowing. Because when we first came out here, the place hadn't been mowed in a long time, and it was covered in an invasive species, the Himalayan blackberry. This was all over the property. You could not see anything out here. These covered everything. And this right here, we had mowed or cut this down last year. This is a year of growth. In some places it's over 6 feet tall, and it just covers everything. It kills everything underneath it. So like these trees, it'll grow up these trees, kill the trees, rob their nutrients. It just destroys everything. So this field was covered with blackberries. We cut them down, we tilled it out, we replanted grass seed, pasture seed mix specifically, about 3 years ago, and the grass has been out competing the blackberries, because without using poison, which we don't because we have a water source here, killing the blackberries just doesn't happen. So you have to out compete them, which is what we've done successfully here. We've out competed them. But how often do you need to mow? Can you get away with mowing every 4 months? Can you get away with mowing every 4 weeks? You know, because right now we've been mowing every week. It's a lot of mowing. So we've cut down these fields. I've got some areas up here we hadn't mowed in 4 months. This area here we hadn't mowed in about 4 weeks. And then kind of the peripheral where we mow every week. And I'm just going to compare the understory. How thick has that grass grown in? Because if it grows in thick, it will outcompete the invasives. So let's go take a look at that real quick. We'll start at the oldest part, but let's go back in time and look at how it looked yesterday before I'd cut it down. Here we go. Okay, so I'd expect the grass would be taller than this after 4 months, but it's kind of all folded down on itself. There's been deer out here sleeping in it and whatnot, and that's kind of cool. We don't really use this area for nothing, so it's nice to give a little bedding for some deer. But there's some invasives that have come in, or just weeds. So there's some weeds. They're growing real nice. And I'm starting to see some blackberry intrusion out here. And that's our real concern. This whole place was covered in blackberries before we got here. Here's some. These aren't your nice grandma's blackberry pie blackberries. These are called Himalayan blackberries. And once they get established, they're hard to unestablish. And they will completely take over your property and kill everything. But this is what we're trying to prevent here. This is all blackberries. These things start killing all the trees out here. That tree's dead halfway up and fell off out here. I had to clean that up. They just choke all the life out. So how much management does it really take to make sure this doesn't turn into this? So I'm going to cut this one down, and then we'll look at another part of the field that I haven't mowed in about 4 weeks, and then another part that I mowed about 4 days ago, and we'll just kind of compare what they look like. So let's mow this down real fast. Okay, so there's a pretty clear line here. This side I hadn't mowed in 4 months. This side hadn't mowed in 4 or 5 days. Let's rake off this top story of cut grass. So the grass was green. You know, it's just the lower story doesn't stay as green because you need the green up top, not green on bottom. You got to send all their chlorophyll or whatever to the top. I don't know if that's really how this works. I'm not a pasturologist. I can tell you right now, it's easier to rake through the old grass It is not nearly as thick. There's a good spot right there to look. You can see just from here, there's a bunch of patches under here. Whereas on the area we maintain more, there's not as much patchiness. There's a real clear line there because the understory gets brown when you let it get long. Yeah, look here, you can just see the dirt right through the grass. So, any weeds want to get a foothold, they're going to just shoot through. So over here, there is still dirt. You can still get to it, but it's certainly thicker in the understory. Like the space between stalks of grass anecdotally, is thicker. So I mean, it seems to really, to me at least, say it's probably better to mow more often than not. Well, how about a closer time between mows? You know, 1 month versus 1 week. You know, if you get a 1 month mowing cycle. Let's look at that real quick. All right, so this is the pasture that we haven't touched in about 4 weeks. And to me, just right off the back, it looks pretty healthy. There are some blackberries in here. But there's also, boy, great looking grass. It's starting to seed out though. And a bunch of clover. And clover is something we want to encourage out here. It's just really good for the soil. So, you know, it's looking pretty nice, but we'll mow this down and see what the understory looks like and see if we're getting really good growth out here. Okay, so here's a really good line here on this side. This is something we've been mowing weekly. This is a side where we haven't mowed it in about 4 weeks. So, you know, there's some dead grass on top of it. So I can rake that away and then we'll get a look at the understory. Now, when you mow with a tractor, some of the grass just gets flattened down. So, you know, we got some long grass here still. But let's jump into the understory here and see what we see. So this hadn't been mowed for about a month. And you can see it's pretty brown in the understory, which, you know, you want your green up top. That's where it catches the chlorophyll. More like borophyll, am I right? So it's a little brown down at the bottom. We see our under this grass though. See how it's a little bit clumpy? It's not terrible though. Yeah, a little clumpy in here, but I wouldn't say this is awful. I can see some dirt, but it hasn't choked itself out too terribly bad. It's a little thicker here. Let's just peel back the layers. But that's not bad. You know, it looks pretty nice down where you get to your roots. This grass is pretty thick still, pretty healthy in the lower layer. You know, once we get some rain on this, if it ever rains again, this will green out real nice. And the grass that we cut, it just looks like good hay. It's healthy. That's some good stuff there. Yeah, comparing that to right next door, where we've been cutting all the time, it is thicker down here. There's a stick. So it's certainly thicker in this understory. Like I can move stuff around and find dirt if I need to, but it is thicker and lusher. You know, there's certainly a color difference in the understory, which we know there's going to be because it's the top that stays green. The bottom browns out a bit. But yeah, still a pretty big difference between how thick this is and how thick that is. Yeah, so let's just compare that. That's stuff that had been growing for 4 months versus 1 month. There's a dog that's been growing for about 12 months. And it's significantly greener. You know, and greenness isn't the only method of assessing health on grass, but you know, the more green the grass is, the more it grows, because it, I don't know, it's healthier, I guess. I don't know. I'm not a grassologist, but yeah, that's a pretty healthy looking grass there, not a bunch of patches. So 4 months versus 4 weeks. This just, I mean, looking from the top down is way thicker. Okay, so it's a week later and I just want to do a quick walk through the field again. This is the older part that hadn't been mowed in like most of the year, about 4 months. Still pretty brown, but it's starting to get green in the shady areas. We haven't had any rain since I mowed last. I did take a section here. Let me show you. It's hard to tell, but I took the lawnmower and just mowed a stripe through here so I could kind of see if the understory is recovering after being mowed. And you can see we're starting to get some green in here, which is good. So it's recovering, but boy, it sure is patchy in here. I mean, just standing from above, you can see it's brown all over and really, really patchy. Not a lot of thickness to the grass. So this really does reinforce what I was thinking, that, you know, we're going to have all this bare dirt between the grass. The grass can then, you know, not compete or get out-competed by weeds. So, you know, using this method of just mowing a couple times a year or once a year, I think could result in this getting covered in weeds. Even though, again, in the shady spots, it's greening out a bit. It'll thicken up, you know, the root systems will spread, but this is really patchy. And underneath all this grass, it's actually doing okay. It's kind of moist, which surprised me. I would expect everything underneath this cut grass to be dead, but it's after a week, there's some moisture in there, so that's kind of interesting to me, but still very, very patchy. Let's go see one of the spots where I just hadn't mowed in a month, and then we got to it. Let's go over there. Of course, your mileage may vary on all this, but I guess this is all anecdotal or whatever, but it's as close to science as I'm going to be able to do out here. So if you're a fieldologist or a pasturologist or whatever they call it, you know, hit me up, let me know what's going on. Okay, I'm in the area that we hadn't mowed in a month. Let's take a look here. So the grass is very much greener than the part we hadn't mowed in 4 months. So there is some, you know, dead cut grass on the top because the grass had gotten kind of long. But again, underneath, it's really holding a lot of moisture. I can feel the moisture under my hands, even though it's been in the 80s for a week, which is really hot for out here. It's retaining moisture, which is nice. And when I start pushing this grass around, you know, there's certainly spots between the grass, like you can find it, but it is much more full and lush. You know, look at that. It's really lush, full grass compared to the other spot that I hadn't mowed in 4 months. You know, you can just run your fingers right through the grass. This one, there's a lot of grass in the fingers. So yeah, this is really reinforcing my notion, really, you know, at least out here where I'm at in the Pacific Northwest, and at least in the heat of summer, you can get away with, you know, not mowing every week and still keep all this grass really, really full and lush. I mean, it looks great, it feels great. There's still moisture in the understory. I think it will continue to outcompete weeds that try to come in. Whereas, you know, the spot that I let just grow and grow and grow, it's After a week, it's brown. There's a lot of patchiness in the understory, and that's a lot of room for these blackberries and other invasives to get a foothold. Plus, letting it get that long puts you in danger of fire. So, okay, there's my non-scientific way of seeing, how much we should mow out here. So what are we going to do going forward? Well, I'm going to be lazy, just based on this initial look. And I will mow around these trees and stuff, because the blackberries, they love growing around these trees, because you can't get to them, you can't nip them. So I stay mowing around these trees to knock down stuff like that. Keep my weed control going. Keep mowing around the houses and buildings, to keep the vermin down. But otherwise, we can let a lot of this go, I think, a little longer. Maybe a month between mowing. Going 4 months, I didn't like the looks of it down there. When we looked at it initially, the weeds were tall. There's lots of them. And when you let the weeds get tall, they start seeding out or vining out in the case of blackberries, because they think, hey man, we've got enough energy here and enough nutrients available that we can make more of ourselves. We don't want them to make more of themselves. We want them to make less of themselves. So we do want to mow regularly, but maybe not every week regularly. We could probably get away with a little less. And grass loves to be mowed. The more you mow it, the more it grows, because grass likes being eaten by animals. And I don't know, it's just, they've had a symbiotic relationship for years, right? Animals going through and chewing down the grasslands, and the grasslands flourish as a result, and they don't get competed out by other plant species. They do the outcompeting. So yeah, I think to keep a healthy pasture, based on this anecdotal evidence, based on zero scientific method, based on just one small place in the world here in the Northwest, kind of makes sense to mow maybe every month-ish. Mowing twice a year, probably not a good idea, but every month, that's fair enough. Maybe you don't have to get out there every week. All right, we'll see you around.